Well, hello and welcome to this English lesson about school. I love talking about school. As most of you know, my real job, as we might say in English, is that I am a high school teacher. It's summer right now, so I don't need to go to work. But during the school year, I am a high school teacher, and I love talking about school. I think it's because when I was young, when I was a student, I loved being in school. I have always loved learning. And so I think naturally, people who love learning sometimes choose to become teachers. So as a teacher, I'm always excited to do a lesson about school. In particular, this lesson is about back to school. Back to school will be happening in a few weeks here in Ontario, Canada. It's kind of the middle of summer vacation, but I've noticed already that the back to school sales have started. So students usually need to buy a few things before they go back to school. So today I thought I would do a lesson on back to school. So school, let me make this a little bit bigger for you. School, I actually modified this slide for this lesson because school may look like one or the other when you look at the pictures over here. School last year, for the most part for us, was online, but also we had in-person learning. So if you look to the far side of this slide, you'll see there's a boy looking at his computer. He would be doing what's called online learning or remote learning, and these students are doing in-person learning. So school is, of course, the place where kids go. In Canada, kids from the age of about 4 or 5 up to age 17 or 18 attend school on a daily basis. So school is the place where children go in order to learn things. This is what's called back to school time. Back to school usually happens right after a holiday that we call Labor Day in Ontario, Canada. And in many other parts of the world, I think it's similar. Back to school is the day when kids go back on the bus or they walk to school and they start school again. So the phrase back to school is used a lot right now. We would call this the back to school season, or it's back to school time, or you might even say something like, well, it's almost back to school, isn't it? So we use the phrase in a lot of different ways in English to talk about usually the end of August and the first few days of September. We would call that the back to school time. It is, of course, right now summer holidays, or what we also call summer vacation. So if there are any students watching this, they probably don't want to talk about back to school. Back to school is not a fun time for some students. I'm sure some students look forward to it, but some students do not look forward to it. But it is right now summer holidays or summer vacation. In Ontario, Canada, students get 2 months off from school, and teachers do too, which is kind of a bonus. And we would refer to that as summer holidays or summer vacation. A good time to hang out with friends, maybe just read a book. Older students usually get part-time jobs, so they'll get a summer job during the summer vacation or summer holidays. My 2 oldest kids both have summer jobs right now. They both found places to work for the summer so that they could earn some money. We have, of course, other things that happen during back to school time, and we add the phrase back to school to it. So right now, people are going to start to do back to school shopping. You know, the word to in back to school, sometimes we actually put the number 2 back to school. Guess it looks cooler. But right now, I've noticed that we get flyers in the mail. A flyer is like a paper that shows everything that is on sale at a store. And all of them say back to school shopping time. So we have times of the year when we shop for certain things. This is certainly a time of the year where there will be a lot of people doing back to school shopping. And of course, because of that, we will have what's called back to school sales. A back to school sale is a sale during the month of August where things that you normally buy for school are cheaper than they normally would be. So right now, the back to school shopping has started. The stores are sending out flyers where they're showing a lot of back to school sales. You know, pencils 50% off, or pencil cases 25% off. There are a lot of back to school sales happening right now because students need things like school clothes. So in general, sometimes kids buy clothes just for school. It's not really any different than their normal clothes, but it might be different than the clothes they play in outside. They might be clothes that they keep a little cleaner because they are their school clothes. So for our kids, we would say something like, well, we need to go buy some more school clothes for you because that pair of pants has a hole in the knee, or that shirt doesn't fit you anymore. You need some new school clothes. Some schools, though, have a school uniform. This is quite common at probably, I would say, about 10 to 20% of the schools in Canada have school uniforms. I know in certain countries, school uniforms are very, very popular. For instance, the school I work at has school uniforms, but the school my kids go to, my younger kids, doesn't have school uniforms. So again, a school uniform is clothing that you usually buy from the school, or you buy from a store that the school chooses, so that all the students look the same. Common school uniforms would be like black pants with a white shirt and tie, and those types of things. So if your school doesn't have school uniforms, you might just need school clothes. Maybe you need some school clothes because as a kid, sometimes kids outgrow them, and then maybe you need to get some new shirts and pants for your school uniform. And of course, there are back to school sales because people need school supplies. So the word or phrase we use to refer to all the things you buy when you need to go to school, we would call school supplies. Some schools supply certain things to the students, but other schools, most schools require students to buy certain things before they go, in Canada, of course. So the school would supply things like glue or maybe colored paper if they're doing art, or paint. But my kids and most Canadian kids have to buy certain school supplies in order to go to school. They might need a binder. We would call this a 3-ring binder. This is something that you can open and close, and it can hold paper. You might need to buy a notebook, which is just a small book that you can take notes in. When you're a student at school, it's a good idea to take notes. You might need to buy some pencils, pens, or a highlighter. So a pencil is, of course, something you can sharpen, and it's used for math or art classes. A pen is something that's permanent. This is a Bic pen made by my friends over in France. Bic pens are really cool. I like them. I shouldn't tell you this, but I actually like chewing on the cap of the Bic pen. I shouldn't mention that, should I? And then a highlighter is something you can use to basically make words yellow so that you can see them easier. A highlighter is a really good tool if you're learning English. You can highlight new words. Don't do that in library books, though. Only use a highlighter in a book that you own. You might need an eraser so that if you write something in pencil, you can erase it later. You might need a pencil case to store all of your stuff. So once again, these are all school supplies that kids in Canada, and I think most other countries, would need to buy. They would need to go to a back to school sale, and if they didn't have a pencil case, they would need to buy one. The school would not give these items to the kids. You might need a little pencil sharpener. Although most classrooms have a pencil sharpener, sometimes students are required to have a small one with them that they can keep in their pencil case. And maybe they need a laptop, maybe they need a calculator, and maybe they need a backpack, or what we sometimes just call a book bag. So let's quick review again. These are all things that we would call school supplies, and some of these things students will need to buy before they go back to school. A binder, maybe 2 binders, maybe 4. They might need a notebook. They might need a pencil, pen, and a highlighter, or kind of like a few of each. They would put them with their eraser in their pencil case, and they might need a small pencil sharpener, and they might need a laptop and a calculator. This really depends on the school as well. I think at my school, we have a class set of calculators. And then they might need a backpack or a book bag for all of these items. So the first day of school is called the first day of school, but I wanted to put this slide in here. I mean, it sounds pretty obvious, doesn't it? In our part of Canada, the day after Labor Day, which is a holiday in September, we have the first day of school. So the first day of school this year, I actually didn't look this up. I should have looked it up. First day of school this year is probably September 7th. That would be my guess. First day of school, September 7th. But you also have really little kids who haven't gone to school before, sometimes have their first day of school. So they've never been to school, and that's an exciting day for them. The first day of school, whether you're like 4 or 5 and you've never been, or if you're like 14, it's usually a day where parents take a photo. We often take a photo on the first day of school of our kids with their backpacks and their new school clothes, and then we put that in a photo album. The school day in Ontario, Canada. So when you talk about, the work day is from about 8 till 5. Some people work from 7 till 4:30. Some people, their work day is 7:30 till 5:30. But the school day is a little shorter. And the term we use to talk about the length of the day out of school is school day. Students have to get used to it. In Ontario, Canada, the school day can range from 8:30 to 3:30. It might go from 9 till 3. For my school, the school day is from 8:30 to 3:30, and classes start at 10 to 9 and go to 3:05. So the school day is just a way of talking about the day at school. If you are older and if you are at a high school, you might have a semester system. The semester system is a system where you take certain classes for about 4 or 5 months, and then you are done, and then you take other classes. Our elementary schools, our grade schools, kids under the age of 13 do not have semesters. They usually take the same classes all year long. So they'll have math class every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for 40 minutes or something like that. In our high schools, we have a semester system. So this fall, for the fall semester, for semester 1, I'm teaching 2 classes this year. I'm teaching a computer class and a business class. And then semester 2, I'm teaching my 3 French classes again. So a semester system is when you break the year up a little bit. Of course, the student is the person who is learning. We don't use the word pupil anymore. It's kind of an old term. And we sometimes use the word learner, although this is more common in other English-speaking countries. In Canada, we would call the kids who go to school students. I think 30 or 40 years ago, you might call them pupils. And we usually don't use the word learner very often. Like, how many students do you have in your class? That would be a common question, not how many learners. Although it is a common English word that means the same as student. You might have a student in your class who is a class clown. So a class clown is a student who is always smiling and laughing and doing silly things. You can see this boy has decided to take all his new pencils and insert them in his ears and in his nose and just be silly. Class clowns often tell jokes. As a teacher, when I write on the board, sometimes class clowns say funny things and make everyone laugh, or they throw things. A class clown is someone who, I was going to say, isn't serious about learning, but I've actually had class clowns who got the best grade in the class in the past. Some students can be silly and also learn very well at the same time. We don't use this term anymore. In Canada, we also call a student like this a keener. That's a Canadian word, I think, though. But a teacher's pet is a student who likes to sit at the front, likes to answer the questions, and all of those kinds of things. I think Agnon, if you watch Petit Nicolas in French, I think Agnon is the teacher's pet. He's the small boy that knows all the answers. Sorry, that's a little bit of French. I might have got the name wrong. But a teacher's pet, it's not a nice term. It's kind of an insult now. As a teacher, I would not use the word teacher's pet. But when students bug each other, they might say, you're the teacher's pet. You're always answering the questions. And then, of course, you have the teacher. The teacher is the person at the front of the room who does all of the teaching. In Canada, we have one teacher per classroom, but there also might be someone called a teacher's aide who helps the teacher, or there might be a teaching assistant. There might be a student teacher who comes and helps the teacher for a few months to learn how to teach. But the person who does most of the work is the teacher. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Teacher aides do a lot of work as well. The person who plans the lessons is the teacher. If you are at a university or college, we would call that teacher a professor. Now, some of you call me Professor Bob, and that would be incorrect. I know in other languages like French, professeur means teacher, but in English there is a distinction. So I am a teacher. Brent in the chat from American English with this guy is a teacher. If Brent or I went and got our PhD, and if we went and taught at a university, we would then be Professor Bob and Professor Brent. That's a nice ring to it, doesn't it, Brent? By the way, I have no desire to do that at this point in my life. I like what I'm doing now. The place where you teach is called a classroom. I'm going to speed up maybe a bit here. I think some of these are quite familiar to you. So a classroom is a place where you teach. By the way, one of the original classrooms was a tree. So hundreds of years ago, trees used to be classrooms because if you learned outside, it was a nice shady place to learn. So sometimes when I'm making a lesson under a tree, it makes me smile because I feel like I'm an old-fashioned teacher from 500 years ago teaching under a tree. If you are at a university, you could go to a classroom. You might also call it a lecture hall. So when I was in university, some of my classes were in small classrooms and some were in lecture halls, which were bigger rooms where more people could sit and learn. You, of course, will have a desk. This we would call a student's desk. There's also a teacher's desk at the front of the room, which is bigger. And there's all different kinds of desks in Canadian classrooms. My students don't like these kinds of desks where the seat is like connected to the desk, because some students by grade 12 are quite tall. They're very big, and it's hard to fit in a desk when you're 6'2" and in grade 12. There will be probably a whiteboard or a chalkboard in the room. We have more whiteboards than chalkboards now. Chalkboards have kind of slowly been removed from classrooms over the last 20 years and have been replaced with whiteboards. A whiteboard's a little cleaner. You don't get chalk on your hands when you use a whiteboard, but you might see a whiteboard or blackboard in the room. By the way, even if the blackboard is green, we still call it a blackboard. So I still have a classroom where I do have a blackboard at the back, and it's actually green, but it's still called a blackboard or chalkboard. You could just call it a chalkboard too. And then of course you have whiteboard markers. So on the far side of this image, you can see whiteboard markers. They are actually the exact same kind I use in my room, Expo. And then you see that there is chalk. I like to use different colors, especially when I'm teaching French. It's nice to write sentences in one color and then kind of teach things about the sentence using another color. Very, very handy to use different colors to teach different grammatical or grammar concepts when I'm teaching French. And then here's another eraser. So just like the first eraser, which is used to erase pencil, this eraser can be used to erase whiteboard markers or chalkboards or blackboards. And then there will probably be a bulletin board in the room where students can hang their work or where the teacher can hang some posters. And usually in my room, I have students create different, they do different assignments where they create something visual, and then we will put that on the bulletin board for everyone else to see. We do, in the earlier classes, we do things like comic strips in French, and then we put them on the bulletin board. And we use, of course, either a push pin, which is the red thing here. We would call that a push pin, or thumbtacks. I generally use push pins. I find they're easier to take back out. Thumbtacks go in really nicely, but it's sometimes hard to get the thumbtack back out again. And then there will, of course, be a projector and a screen. The projector in this picture is on the ceiling, and the screen is way over there on the far wall. We also have in our classrooms something called a smartboard, where you can write on the smartboard and it shows up on the computer through the projector. A little bit hard to explain. I don't use my smartboard a lot because I do all of my annotations on my laptop, which I put onto the projector screen. Let's see where we're at. Last thing for this section, bookshelf. There might be a bookcase or bookshelf in your classroom. So for me, I have bookshelves that are full of French books because I teach French. There's a few computer books on there, but they're really old. When you buy a textbook for a computer class, within a few years, it's obsolete. The information changes way too quickly. So you might have a bookshelf or a bookcase in your classroom. Oh yes, we just finished talking about what is in a classroom. And we are now going to talk about just a few odds and ends about school. So one of those would be textbooks. Some classes require that you have a textbook. Most schools in Canada, when you are in school, like if you're in grade 1 up to grade 12, so in elementary school, grade school, or high school, schools provide the textbooks, okay? So you do not have to buy your textbook. So when you go to math class in grade 9, on the first day of school, the teacher will give you a textbook. When you go to university or college in Canada, you have to buy your textbooks. So again, a textbook is a book that has all of the information you need to learn, or most of it, for that class. So when you take a French class with me, I give you a French textbook, and it's like grade 9 French textbook. Actually, it's called Express 9e. For grade 9. But the textbook contains most of what you will learn that semester in printed form. And again, in elementary schools and high schools in Canada, the teacher will give you a textbook. So if you're in university, though, it can be quite pricey. I know even 25 years ago when I was in university, it was like $400 or $500 a semester to buy textbooks. It was expensive. Now, during class, the teacher will teach a lesson. So for me, a lesson is all of the things I have planned for one class. There might be small lessons within the bigger lesson, but basically I make a lesson plan and then I teach the lesson plan that day. So students will take certain lessons from me. An assignment is when I ask a student to do a certain type of work and then give it to me when they're done, okay? So a lesson can have assignments in it, but sometimes my lesson, I don't require the students to give me anything. I'll say, write in French, write what you did yesterday in 5 sentences, and then I'll have them read it out loud. And I don't take the paper from them and grade it. It's just a little lesson to practice. But an assignment would be if I said, write 5 paragraphs about something you like doing and give it to me. And then as a teacher, I will grade it or I will correct it. In Canada, we say I will mark it and then give it back. So lessons aren't always graded, but assignments are usually things that I would collect and grade. Now you can do assignments that aren't graded, but generally if I say, this assignment is due tomorrow, or here's an assignment, please finish this. Let's see here. Lockers. So generally our grade schools and elementary schools don't have lockers. Students usually just hang their book bag on a hook. But in high school, you usually have a locker and you usually have a combination lock on your locker. And you would put your books in your locker and only take the books out that you need for the class you are going to. The lockers are usually all in a hallway. So a school is they used to be fairly boring buildings. So, 10 or 20 years ago, a school was just hallways and classrooms and some bathrooms or washrooms. Now we have hallways and classrooms, and we're starting to add other spots to our school. Like our school has a nice meeting area that we call an atrium. Of course, we have a gymnasium as well. But lockers, if you get a locker, it will be in the hallway. Your locker will have a number on it. So on the first day of school, you would have to find your locker. When I was in school, I had to share a locker. My school didn't have enough lockers, so everyone in the 9th grade had to share a locker with someone else. I ended up sharing it with a good friend of mine, so it wasn't a problem, but it certainly was crowded by the lockers. So young kids will go out for recess. So during the day, they will have breaks, and they are called recess. So in Canada, if you are in anywhere from kindergarten, grade 1 up to grade 8, you will have recess during the day. Elementary schools have recess. We don't call it recess in high school, though. We simply call it lunchtime. So my school in particular, it's a high school. There are 2 classes in the morning, and then we have lunchtime, and then there are 2 classes in the afternoon. There's a small break between the first 2 classes, but for high school students, we don't call it recess. They don't go out for recess. Sometimes the grade 9 students on the first day of school, they might ask, when is recess? And then I just say, oh, here we just have lunchtime. There's no recess. I try to answer that as nicely as possible. You can just call it lunch, but we do certainly use the word lunchtime most often. Like, oh, I have a meeting at lunchtime, or can you come and write your quiz at lunchtime, the one you missed last week? Lunchtime. I usually just eat at lunchtime. That's my favorite thing to do at lunchtime. Younger kids will play on the playground. So elementary schools and grade schools will have playgrounds, and they'll have lots of playground toys and things for students to do. So at recess, they will usually go outside and play on the playground. Now, I know from lessons in the past, people have asked, do Canadian kids go outside for recess and play on the playground in the middle of the winter? Yes. If it's above minus 20 degrees Celsius, then kids will go outside and play. If it's below minus 15, minus 20 and windy, we will have indoor recess instead of outdoor recess. But that's at grade schools. At high school, the kids just do whatever they want at lunchtime. So there's 3 things that you might do in a classroom, and each one is slightly bigger than the other. A quiz is usually something that's really simple. It's a test that takes about 5 to 10 minutes. It might only have 5 or 10 questions on it. I might say to my students, you have a small quiz tomorrow. You need to know these 20 vocabulary words. A test is definitely bigger. A test might take anywhere from 30 minutes to over an hour. Our classes are 70 minutes long. They're an hour and 10 minutes long. So students might write a test that takes half the class. It might take the whole class. There might even be 1 or 2 students still writing their test when we get to the end of class. And then at the end of our semesters, we have what are called exams. We actually also have them sometimes in the middle. You can have a midterm exam. So halfway through the school year or halfway through the semester, you might have a midterm exam. And of course, an exam is a very large test that takes about 2 to 3 hours to complete. And it's the short form for examination. So an examination, that's just too hard to say, isn't it? Exams a lot easier. Students have exams at the end of their semester and at the end of their school year. So in Ontario, Canada, students from grades 7 or 8 up have exams. Usually younger children don't have exams. And then, of course, some kids go to school on a school bus. A school bus in Canada looks just like this. It is a big yellow bus. All of our school buses are yellow. They have lots of lights on them. When they stop to pick up kids, the red lights flash. The little stop sign goes out. And if you pass a school bus with its lights flashing and the stop sign out, the police will give you an enormous ticket. I'm not sure how much it is, but hundreds of dollars if you pass a school bus. It is, do not ever pass a school bus if the stop sign is out and the lights are flashing. It's very dangerous for you, dangerous for the kids. And if you do it and get caught, it's a pretty big fine. You don't want to do it. By the way, a little fun fact, my grandfather was a farmer, but he also drove school bus. I was not aware of that until a few years ago. There was a picture of my grandfather's farm taken from an airplane, and there was a school bus parked beside the house. And I was like, what's that? And they said, oh, Grandpa used to milk the cows, and then he would drive the school bus, and then he would come home and do all his farm work, and then he would go and do the run at the end of the day. Lots of fun.